Formally, hello everybody. This is day one, Foundations of Prep for Wave Week. A little bit earlier, we had a session about busting mindset blocks. It was really, really good. So you want to tune into that one in the portal a little bit later on. This one is on E&O Insurance, and I have Miguel Campos from Berkshire Hathaway with us. If you have any questions, I will try and monitor the chat, but again, it's a little bit difficult. So whatever we don't answer live here, I'll go ahead and I'll filter over to Miguel and can connect everybody that way. Alrighty, so without further ado, welcome Miguel to Prep for Wave Week.
Well, thanks for having me, Rita. I am very excited to be here. I love the opportunity to do platforms like this, just because specifically E&O Insurance is this elusive creature, and not just in the travel world, but in all worlds. You know, we're all purchases of some sort of insurance. Business insurance specifically is a whole nother animal compared to your home and auto and life insurance. And E&O specifically is quite different. And travel E&O is very different from the type of E&O insurance you would get as a financial planner, an attorney, just because of the different risks faced by people, travel agents, tour operators that are working with foreigners and sending people to foreign countries. So we're excited to be here to kind of go over some things and have a conversation about it.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you kind of brought that up, because I guess the more that I dove into E&O, I was like, oh, there's a lot of industries that utilize E&O. So for people who are like, I don't know what you're talking about, what's E&O Insurance?
So E&O is an acronym, stands for Errors and Omissions Insurance. But just a piece of information for you that's important to understand is E&O goes by many different names in this industry as well as in the European markets. So commonly you'll also hear it referred to as, here's some acronyms: CPL, PL, or just E&O, which CPL stands for Commercial Professional Liability. PL stands for Professional Liability. On the top of our policies, you'll see Commercial Professional Liability, and then there'll be a subheading that says Travel Agent and Tour Operator Specific Insurance. So all of those different names essentially mean the same thing. Professional liability is the type of insurance that someone who sells a service versus a product would need to help protect itself. Like the Lego company sells a product that someone could choke on. Or it's painted with some sort of a paint that could later, 20 years from now, turn out to have some sort of adverse effect. So they have some sort of a product liability that may fall under a general liability policy 4 times removed, meaning that there's all kinds of other insurance that sort of fall under a general umbrella term. Professional liability is the same thing. Our particular policy, without going into everything before we go back and forth here, is designed specifically for the needs of a travel agent and or a tour operator. So it's a hybrid policy. You're not going to, if you were to go out to the insurance market yourself, typically you're not going to find this specific policy unless you reach out to us directly, because it mixes general liability and professional liability together. So if you're ever working with an insurance broker and you're trying to get this insurance, they may reference GL, they may reference PL, they may reference E&O. Our policy is a mix of all of those, which most insurance brokers are not used to. So there is a lot of confusion in the market when you see a product like ours and you're comparing it to others. And rightfully so, there should be a little confusion, because it's not a general type of policy. It is designed specifically for this industry, and it's all encompassing of a lot of different products that come under one form called the Commercial Professional Liability form. But for this industry.
Okay. Because I know when I first started my business, officially 13 years ago as of Friday, I signed my host contract. I did all the things with the state, made an LLC. And I think in the top 5 was I got E&O Insurance. Where would you say, is that the best place where people should be getting E&O Insurance, is before they're taking clients?
Yeah, so you want to, functionally, you want to make sure that you have coverage in place before you're disseminating any marketing material, before you're soliciting business, and absolutely before you are giving any advice or sending any itineraries out for approval, or even if you're working on setting up a custom itinerary, and before you're getting any kind of down payment. If you get the insurance after that, you're still covered, but you're not covered for anything before that. So if I were to send you an itinerary for some awesome trip to Portugal and you love it and everything's good, and then you get insurance later on and nothing changes with that itinerary, and then we pay for it after the insurance is in place. If there's a claim somehow related to the specifics of that itinerary, there's a good chance it wouldn't be covered because you sent the itinerary out that they ended up purchasing before you had your insurance in place. So,
Gotcha.
one thing I always tell people when you're shopping for insurance, if you already know you're going to get the insurance, don't waste time thinking about it if you're already going to spend the money. Because every day, if somebody calls you up this weekend and you're thinking about getting your insurance, even though you know you're going to get it or you're required to get it by your host or something like that, if you book somebody's trip this weekend because a friend, even if it's a friend trip, they call you and it's like, yeah, we'll book this world cruise or whatever, and then you were going to get the coverage on Monday anyways, that trip you just booked isn't covered. And it may be the only claim you ever have with me in 30 years of being a partner with me. And the claim's going to end up being denied. So I've had that happen a few times, and I've done this for 13 years. So I just put that out there. If you're going to get the insurance, you're already doing business or you're pretty much set up to go. Unless you know for a fact that no matter what, if somebody calls me to book $10 million this weekend, I'm still not going to do it until I have my insurance. Don't put yourself in a weird position where you were going to get the insurance anyways. Somebody calls you sooner and you book the travel, but you don't have the insurance till Monday or a scenario like that. That's just probably not good business for you. So keep that in mind. It's not retroactive, and it doesn't matter what insurance your company you're with. Insurance is never retroactive unless you already have an existing policy in place that matches the policy you're going to. So you're switching insurance companies. That's the only time it's retroactive, and only if the insurer approves it. They may not like the other insurance company that you had or the other insurance types of coverage that they had, and they might deny retroactive coverage for one reason or another. So just keep that in mind. And if none of this makes sense after this call, but you just remember some of this stuff, retroactive, not retroactive, ask your agent if you have one.
Awesome. Okay. So I know a lot of people, they're either saying that they have E&O or don't have E&O. I think this is also a good time to kind of, especially when you brought up general liability. So what would you say are the top 3 to 5 things or reasons that we should have E&O insurance?
Yeah. So, insurance, first and foremost, I think the entire world learned a little thing or two coming out of COVID for 3.5 years. If not only, we learned that things that we thought were impossible actually aren't necessarily that impossible. And, not necessarily business related per se, but coming out of all of the different global catastrophes that we have seen between wildfires and flooding and civil unrest, that seemingly we've had 4 years of craziness all over the world. Now, granted, most of that stuff is not insurable, okay, but it does prove the point that crazy stuff happens. These are things that no one thought would ever happen in their wildest dreams, and yet they all happened in like a 4-year time span, just kind of one after the other. So being aware that unlikely things do happen, we all know this now, and you need to plan for those things, however absurd they feel. So some of the things to consider are, how big is my business and how new am I? If you have a very large business, you have an increased likelihood of a claim at some point. It doesn't matter, and this is the common misconception, it doesn't matter if you don't make a mistake. You may be perfect at your job, but A, mistakes do happen, and B, even if you don't make a mistake, if somebody could be injured on a trip, or somebody could just simply blame you, even though you did everything correctly, they could simply blame you and try to hold you liable in a court of law. And at that point in time, you have to go and now defend yourself. And yes, this does happen a lot in a given year. A lot of these suits get thrown out, but you need to show up to court with an attorney to make a case in order to have it thrown out. So it's important to understand how big your business is affects the need for coverage and how much coverage you're going to get. Also, post-COVID, we've seen a ton of people coming into the travel space, which is awesome. It was kind of going the other way prior to COVID. And then all of a sudden it literally did a 180. I mean, even my senior advisors are just kind of like, what happened? I mean, I'm glad it's happening, but this is interesting. So there's a lot of new people coming into the market and don't understand all of the risks, and some of the stuff we'll go over today will probably scare some people, but that you're not aware. But that's good. You don't know what you don't know, and it's important that you find out what that stuff is.
Mhm.
And if you're new, you really need to understand, what your risks are, and understand that you don't know what you don't know. And it's important to figure that information out by coming to places like this, or doing searches online, or talking to your hosts or your consortiums, etc. Because new agents are also you have smaller sales, but you're new to the industry. There's a lot of different things to learn about, a lot of easy
Oh my
mistakes that
gosh,
can
yeah.
be made, a lot of easy mistakes that can be made, that can cost you a lot of money. You know, 20 years ago, you made a mistake in an airline booking and it cost you $50 to change. I mean, you could just change the city you're going to, not a big deal. Nowadays, if you make a simple mistake, I mean, it could cost you $375 minimum, plus a gas surcharge, plus the fare increase. And you've got 8 people that you have to do that for.
Mhm.
Now you've got a $15,000 loss on your hands. How are you going to fix that? You may be able to afford to fix it, but that's a lot of money to lose in a single instant.
Right.
And you've got the whole year of business left, and tons of customers left to deal with, where there could be other mistakes. So understanding where you are in the risk profile. Are you new and more susceptible to claims because you don't know what you don't know? Or have you been in the industry for a long time and you just have a lot of volume, and it's just a matter of time before something goes wrong, or before you have a customer that's unruly or unsavory and holds you liable for something you've never imagined before?
Mhm.
So those are some main things. Other things are going to be like, what type of travel are you doing? Are you just doing cruises, or are you doing bespoke custom itinerary making, where there's 20 different vendors that you're dealing with, and the taxi guy might not show up on time, and all of a sudden you have this domino effect of losses now for a
Mm.
$20 cab that's now led to $18,000 worth of missed travel.
Oh,
You didn't
wow.
see that coming. you
Right.
know these are things that, and we don't expect people to contemplate it, all of these situations. This is why insurance exists.
Right.
We've contemplated them for you. um, and we have the case studies, we see that different claims come through. So understanding, what kind of business you're in is going to determine how necessary coverage is and at what level.
Mhm.
If you're an adventure tour operator, if you do lots of scuba or lots of safaris, those are all things that are considered higher risk, and there's a reason why. So if you disagree, I understand, but there is a reason why those are considered higher risks, and probably should make you consider, more so than the other person that's just doing cruises, mandating insurance for yourself, because
Right.
those types of losses, while infrequent, they're heavy losses, and usually the consumers that you're dealing with aren't going to take, "Oh, I'm sorry," as an acceptable answer and moving
Right.
on. They're the kind that will and can afford to hold you liable in court.
Right.
So being aware of that is extremely important. Um, Also, consumers, they're just getting more and more savvy, and I would say COVID made consumers a lot more savvy than pre-COVID, in that they want to work with a travel agent or a tour operator that is legitimate. And half of being legitimate, in not just my opinion, is you're a business in the United States. It's
Yep.
just assumed you have insurance.
Right.
It's assumed you have a bank. It's assumed you have an accountant or an equivalent,
Right.
and some sort of legal advice or access to it. And it's becoming more assumed, specifically of the travel industry, that you have an LLC corporation set up. These are things that, while yes, you have to pay someone to do these things, that's nothing bad on that individual selling it to you. These are just expectations that are standard across the industry, for all industries, and more so now with the travel industry, because it was highlighted for 3 years. Um,
Hugely.
you know so that's another big thing, is just your consumers are demanding it more. And along with consumers, I would say you are also dealing with, we've seen an uptick in travel agents and tour operators working with, like, governmental entities, schools, colleges, affinity groups, even certain hosts and consortiums that are requiring you to A, have insurance, and B, have a specific amount of insurance as well to be considered legitimate or to work with these entities. Doing national parks, we have hundreds of tour operators that do just national parks. Not a lot
Mhm.
of risk there, but it's on governmental property, and the U.S. government doesn't want to be held liable for something that happens in those parks with your consumer. So it's not unheard of to have $2 and $5 million limits. which $5 million limit, that's absurd. But we are starting to see it, which just goes to show you that insurance is on everybody's mind.
Yeah.
Not just the person selling it to you, not just the host requiring it of you, like everybody in the United States and across the world. It's on everybody's mind because they just want to be protected or know that there's an option there to protect the parties involved. And that's
Right.
really what this is.
Yeah. And I think that was like a huge thing, especially coming out of COVID and companies that are no longer in business or are doing business as different entities now. It's just on everybody's radar to not only protect yourself, but just be a responsible and ethical business owner. And I think that's kind of like where insurance comes to play, because like you mentioned, we don't know everything. And like, there's possibilities that may not have even been dreamt of. And that's why you do invest in insurance so that you can cover that. Now, I know when we're talking about wave season, either people are getting policies or renewing their policies. So what are some things or like some variables that they should be paying attention to? Because I know it's always like, are you going to be increasing business? Are you reducing business? Like where do you want your business to be focusing?
Sure. So you're just asking, what people should be contemplating as we go into wave season and they're
Yeah.
renewing policies or seeking new policies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're working with us or any insurance, professional for that matter, as a travel agent, tour operator, a lot of things we're looking for post-COVID, and that'll make sense as I go through everything here, is what are your gross sales at? Obviously, for 3 years, no one had any sales.
Mhm.
That's not an acceptable answer anymore. And, from an underwriting perspective, we have seen, I can tell you of the several thousand insureds we have, over 7,500, almost everybody has seen banner year for sales, as in
Mhm.
like, this is the best year they have ever done, like ever. So you want to make sure you've got good sales numbers. And this is gross sales. Now, this is extremely important because 13 years of doing this, it's every week I've got about 10 people that have a different understanding of what gross sales mean.
Mhm.
Gross sales, the easiest way to understand this is, what is your consumer paying for their trip? And do you add any kind of fees on top of that?
Right.
Like operation fees or what have you, or booking fees. So if you have a $1,000 flight and $1,000 cruise and $1,000 fee to do that for them, that's $3,000 in gross sales. That's what the number that we need, because that's the risk your consumer has. If everything goes wrong with that trip, they're out $3,000.
Mhm.
Or you're out $3,000, depending on who's paying for what to fix the situation. Not your commissions, not net revenues, which is what you're actually making, not your EBITDA if you're like a very large company. It's what is the consumer, what's coming out of their checking account for this trip. That is the gross sales that we're looking for.
Mhm.
It's extremely important to get that number correct, especially if you're not working with Berkshire Hathaway Travel Protection. And here's why. Because if you give somebody your commissions and you have a claim and they audit your account and they find out you're doing $3 million in sales, not 300,000, they're going to deny your claim. Now you can appeal it.
Wow.
You can get an attorney and appeal it, but there's a very good chance that insurance company is going to win that case against you. So, and this is a scenario where you just might not understand what gross sales means, or you're misunderstanding
Right.
it, but it's on you as the consumer, because the adjuster does not work with your sales associate, your insurance broker at all, because he can't have that
Mhm.
conflict of interest. So
Yeah.
the adjuster isn't going to care that you don't understand what gross sales are. They're just going to audit. Well, Rita said she only does 300,000 in sales, so we rated her on 300,000. She filed a claim for $1 million loss. We audited it. She's actually got $3 million in sales, substantially incorrect. That's false information. They'll deny the claim. So it's important.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, it's extremely important. Now, that doesn't mean the insurance company has to do that. Okay.
Mhm.
Just so I don't want to misspeak in that matter. They may see that, audit that, and still be okay with it. But that's not the point. The point is that you've given them the ability to deny the claim if they so choose, and it be legitimately denied.
Mhm.
So that is extremely important to understand gross sales and what that is, and to make sure you get it correct. If you're new, then I always tell people, pretend your insurance company is like a banker. If you go in and request money, you need to have a business plan. Otherwise, every bank, no matter who it is going to be like, no, thank you. It's the
Right.
same thing with insurance companies. You can't come to the insurance company and say, I have no idea what I'm going to do. That's not a legitimate answer. You don't have to send me a business plan, but you need to take what's in here, what's in your head, and disseminate that in some form or fashion to us. Like,
Mhm.
what is it that got you into this? And when you work with us, we can, if you set up a call, we can work on a consultative approach with you to sort of like lead you in a direction, because we work with thousands and thousands and thousands of new businesses. So we understand where you're likely going to fall by asking certain questions. But just know it's not unreasonable on our end to say, listen, we need to have some level of understanding of where you're going. Otherwise, you don't have a business, is from a numbers perspective.
Right.
And it's okay to say, I just don't really know. Can we set up a time to go over this? And we can help you out, do that. We have seen that more frequently, which is why our call volume takes a few more days than normal. Before it was like instantly we'd be talking to you. Now it's a couple of days, because we do have so many new agents that are taking advantage of the fact that we have agents here to provide you,
Okay.
and we can go through this with you. That isn't the case for a lot of insurance carriers. There's a
Mhm.
difference between an insurance carrier and maybe your insurance broker. We're the ones with the money paying the claims, but
Mhm.
we also provide you agents to go over questions, comments, concerns, etc.
Okay.
So take advantage of that, because it's unique in our particular business model.
Yeah, yeah. Let's dive into a little bit of like real world scenarios. I know you touched a little bit on adventure travel,
Yep.
and where adventure travel has more risk. And so I know a lot of people are either new to the industry, existing in the industry, and they're just changing niches or what they're offering. And like, can you give us, I guess, like a rough definition of what adventure means and kind of like the different levels? Because I know
Sure.
so many people, like I've heard somebody use the term soft adventure recently, and somebody had to price his adventure, or like his E&O, because it went way up, and he's like, I'm not planning to do like life-threatening vacations here.
Sure.
And so
No,
just
that's
the breadth that the word adventure carries.
sure. Yeah. So just so everybody knows, and first of all, we want to make sure we get the correct rating, regardless of if it's in your favor financially or not, because at the end of the day, even if it's not in your favor, it's got to be the correct rating. Otherwise, you can have denied coverage, and then you just wasted your money. So I'll preface this conversation by saying that. So adventure travel, basically anything that has an increased risk of loss or injury is the generic version of that. Now, I know from a marketing perspective, to your point, Rita, about this other individual you're speaking about, we have had a lot of people, especially post-COVID, that have sort of rebranding and using cool key marketing terms, which are great, and there's nothing wrong with that. But just know that they do have an initial financial consequence on the insurance side of things, until you maybe have a deeper conversation to really understand. And I just had one of these yesterday. A person talked about adventure travel, only to find out that their version of adventure and ours are entirely different. They're just using that as more of a key term.
Right.
That's it. They're not actually doing any kind of really adventure travel. So adventure travel, some takeaways here are going to be things like alpine skiing, trekking adventures, scuba diving, anything with animal riding, equestrian specifically,
Mm.
MiG jet fighter flights, tank flight, or tank. I don't even know what you call it. Tank operations, being able to drive tanks. I've got a
Oh,
company that
wow.
specifically does that. Old Russian, I
Oh,
guess, war
wow.
machines that they're able to use. So like that is considered adventure. They're higher risk of injury in that particular case. What else? Paragliding, zip lining does fall under adventure travel. However, if you're a cruise agent and you're simply booking a cruise and they can get their zip lining excursions on their own accord, then that wouldn't apply to you. That they're doing that on their own
Mm.
terms. There is a risk that they could hold you liable if you had simply mentioned it to them, but we're not really that concerned with that. It's if you're the one booking the excursion for them on the cruise that has zip lining.
Okay.
That falls under adventure. Let's see, mountainous types of excursions, ice climbing, rock climbing, mountain climbing. We've had a lot of that lately. And now there's like literally no insurance company that will insure any kind of mountain climbing. We're the last one that will even consider it.
Oh, wow.
Um, so our largest competitor back in the day used to be Zurich Insurance, which fell under Aon. They, as you may or may not be aware of in the audience, During COVID, they pulled out and dropped all insureds. Several thousand insureds, just kind of like that, were gone. So we were the only option. There is a new option that Aon works with, and Aon's an insurance broker. They're not an insurance carrier. They just broker it. They find you products to sell you. But they work with Arch Insurance, but their coverage is substantially different than its predecessor, than the Zurich program. There's a lot less coverage, and that may be why Zurich got out of the market. I don't know, but they have since fixed those losses by adjusting their insurance to have a lot more exclusions than the previous policy had.
Okay.
And you're seeing that across the whole board. And I say this in an informative way for people, not in a negative way. Ever since COVID, more and more insurance companies have no interest in insuring the travel or tour operator industry. The losses were too heavy, and I think too many insurance companies didn't really understand the intricacies of a travel agent or a tour operator, and so they just insured them, not realizing the losses that they actually faced. And so now have either stepped out of the market, or you'll see some of the online travel agencies or online insurance companies that'll have a travel related policy. But if you go through the coverage, you'll see a lot of exclusions that our policy doesn't have. And I only say that not as a plug to our own thing, but we're the only company now that exists that's been doing this for 35 years and says travel agent and tour operator on the policy. It's important to know, because people are going to use Google out there, and you don't want to get the wrong policy and not know for 10 years until you have your first claim, and then it's not covered.
Yeah.
And it has never been covered for 10 years because you bought the wrong policy or you didn't buy enough coverage. Because the insurance company is not going to send you an "I'm sorry" card or anything like that. That's up to you to determine the coverage you need and read over that ridiculously long policy and understand it. So just understanding that when you go into it, there is a process, and that you should take some time and do a little bit of research, and you should be talking to people. Like, if you don't have an agent there to talk to, buyer beware. Because this is business
100%.
insurance. And I would say that about any company. I would say that about our own. Understand what you're buying, take advantage, talk to who you need to talk to understand it, because it's good for both of us. We
Right.
want you to understand your policy, because I'm going to be your agent. So I want all my customers as educated as possible, because it's a better
Right.
relationship for us both.
Right. Yeah. There are a couple questions that have come in. The first one that I see is, do you include any cyber coverage under your E&O?
So that is a good question. I was really hoping we would be able to discuss that. So
Okay.
we do not offer cyber coverage in our policy. We now, as of this year, because of me, we now have partners that we work with to get cyber insurance.
Oh,
But it is a
awesome.
different. But here's the most important, and the reason that this is important is not to plug the fact that we can now get it for you. The most important part of this conversation is that we have noticed, and I have reviewed some insurance policies. I'm not going to use any names of carriers that have come over that include cyber coverage in it for like $40 extra.
Okay.
I cannot stress this enough. The type of cyber insurance that a lot of these agents think they are getting is not at all the type of cyber insurance policy that they need. There's two different types of cyber insurance. There's first party and third party. First party is insuring your business's losses. Third party is insuring the losses of your consumer. So almost every single policy out there that's sold online that has it included, it only has third party coverage. And usually the coverage is barely enough to cover an event where you would have to notify authorities and get everybody that is possibly affected enough money to be able to credit monitor for 1, 2, 3, or 5 years. And there's almost no coverage for your own operation. So say a cyber hacker hacks your computer, locks it down. It costs $180,000 to access your computer again.
Wow.
It doesn't include that ransomware. The ones that I have seen usually covers about $25,000. Well, if the average ransomware is over 180K, you need to come up with the other, 160 some thousand? And you're in the travel industry, so if you don't access your computer, you may have 30 groups going out in 2 weeks that you need to make final payments for, but you have no idea who that is, and you can't access any of the information. You won't even know what vendors to call because it's all locked down in your computer.
Wow.
Most of them don't have that, and they don't have enough of the coverage.
Okay.
Those cyber add-ons are just a little sprinkle
Like
to
a,
make the policy say it's got cyber insurance.
uh-huh.
And is it better than not having it at all? I guess, but not if it's at the cost of you thinking that you have what you don't have.
Right.
Then no, it's not good. It's a false security that you've got. And you could go again 10 years without something not knowing, even though you had plenty of money to afford the real good cyber insurance. And now you've got $200,000 loss that's not covered. So cyber insurance is probably the most important coverage beyond E&O, and probably the only other coverage that I would advise anybody really to seek unless you have W-2 employees or a retail space. E&O and cyber insurance, but an emphasis on understanding the cyber insurance, not just saying that it has cyber insurance. You need to understand what that means. Most people have no idea that there's such a thing as first and third party. You need to talk to somebody for that.
Right. No, and I'm even thinking, and I don't even know if this would be like policy inclusive, but I know everybody has Facebook or Instagram, and those hackers on those sites alone are getting really stealthy with how they have you clicking links and things, and then they have your full accounts already.
I'll give you a quick, and I have plenty of time just so you know, Rita.
Okay.
Give you this year. I've had 3 customers that ended up having basically what's called social engineering. Long story short, some hacker went into their email unbeknownst to the travel agent, was monitoring emails, found out that this person was going to be receiving and sending a wire somewhere. They mimicked the email. They then created another email address that was like a digit off, like some sort of it was like some sort of foreign keyboard that was used with a little something that we don't have in America that was added to the web email, and had them wire money to an incorrect party. I had $40,000 or $46,000, $18,000, and like $23,000 that were lost with these individuals. That was just money that was lost. That money still needs to be sent to the correct party. So those losses now are actually doubled. So, and that all falls under social engineering, which almost every one of the policies I've seen online with the cyber added has either none of that coverage or it's less than $25,000 in coverage.
Okay, so how do people kind of like get ahead on that, other than like, I mean, looking at the intricacies of making sure that you're emailing the exact person? Like, are there other ways to get ahead of that?
So I mean, the things in order to kind of prepare yourself for these are, first of all, understanding that this happens. If you don't understand that this type of thing happens, then you're not looking for it and you don't have a prayer. So, just a simple Google cyber crimes to be aware of, or talking if you have a whole a consortium or something like that, or industry like AST or something, they may have some resources. But if you just do a Google search, cyber crimes and what to look for, you'll probably get 3 years worth of information. So being aware of the cyber crimes is the first thing. Number 2 is having multi-factor authentication on all your devices, specifically your cell phone. Okay. If you have Google, you probably already, or Outlook, you probably have that built into it. But if you don't have it built into whatever you're using, making sure you tick off and whatever settings to add MFA or multi-factor authentication, which is like when they send you a code to access it.
Right.
If anytime your phone is stolen or not in your care or custody for a specific length of time, you may want to run some sort of a scan or change your passwords. Again, changing passwords is another thing. That's a very simple thing. No one changes their password, and everybody's got like that one really, really secure password we think is really, really secure. And so you use it for everything. You know what? If you're using it with a bank that has zero fraud liability, maybe you don't care because you're not going to be responsible anyways, but this is your business. You are responsible.
Right.
So maybe don't use that password for your business. Use something specific and change it on a regimen. Put it in your Google Calendar, Outlook calendar. Every 3 months, change it. And maybe you have a specific pattern. So you're like, oh man, I can't remember this stuff. Find one that's really difficult, and then just curate that one to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. So there's a little bit of a pattern for you.
I like, there was a tip that was given to, like, whatever your yearly goal is, incorporate that into your passport. So it also keeps that goal top of mind.
Sure. I like that. That's good. I've never heard that. I'm going to change mine when we get off the phone. I like that. So those are all some things. and controlling access. Like if you have a bunch of ICs that are working under you, like controlling access to what they have, what do they have access to? And just controlling access, especially if you have like a retail store or something like that, or maybe you have like a small ADU unit on your house that you use as your office space, controlling access to the computer, having your kiddos use your work computer for their schooling and stuff like that. If you have to, you have to, but if you don't have to, probably don't do that when your kid's trying to get on Fortnite and entering all kinds of different credentials and sending email to here, to there, to there. It makes it vulnerable. Your computer vulnerable. So just be aware of those things, because I can tell you, the amount of cyber losses to small and medium-sized businesses over COVID skyrocketed something like 1,000%. It was absolutely insane.
Oh, wow.
Ransomware claims used to be under 39,000. The average now is over 189,000 and rising like every day. Because small and medium-sized businesses, you're an easy target, and I don't mean that in a bad way. You don't have $1 million, CTO working for you that does this all day long, and have a whole company that scans your systems all day long. Like we do. But that's bad because hackers know that, and you're working with real money, you're making real money, you're wiring real money. So they can take you for everything very easily if you're not aware of these things. So it is extremely important to take it seriously.
Yeah. A quick question just came in. What are your thoughts on password apps like LastPass to help kind of protect against that?
Yeah, me personally, I don't have a professional opinion on it. My personal opinion is I just don't trust those sites. I have seen, you're giving all of your passwords to one entity, and I've seen the most secure entities in the world, like your medical facilities. They've got all your personal data.
Right.
And every year, like 8 of them get hacked.
Right. Right. LastPass, I think, was hacked last year.
Oh, so see, I didn't even know that. But yeah, so I wouldn't put all your ducks in one basket. And that is literally putting all of your ducks/passwords in one basket. The unfortunate truth here is that the old fashioned just have to write it down on a piece of paper, kind of annoying thing. Not even on a spreadsheet if it has access, if it's in a Google Doc spreadsheet.
Digital.
People can access that. Just paper, write it down. And again, I understand in some respects it's not realistic for all of your 7,000 passwords, okay? But maybe for your business, which is your livelihood or close enough to it for some of you, maybe have a sheet of paper for just those passwords.
A question came in about if you're not really sure what your gross sales might be, do you have like a good starting point or kind of like areas that people should consider when they're getting E&O insurance and what they should be telling their agent?
Yep. I can tell you probably, I don't have the exact like percentage in front of me, but I can tell you from experience, most new home-based agents, okay, that are coming into this, that are not entirely green, meaning they're not coming into this never having traveled, having no like outlet of potential business or anything like that. Like say they were what's a good funny example? They were a veterinarian tech before, and now they're totally switching gears.
Yeah.
And they were a cat person, and they were kind of a recluse, so they have no pool of people to pull business. Those people aside, an average home-based agent that's going into this is going to be between $250,000 and $500,000 in sales. And if for all of you that are like, oh my gosh, that's big. Most of the people that get those numbers, they're doing this part-time and hardly working to get those numbers. Travel's expensive.
Right.
And the thing is once you sort of get your name out there, not even in like a big way, your local neighborhood, your local school, your local community, whatever, you're going to be the person to go to. And you can have a group of 10 people going for a girls' weekend that costs $25,000.
Right.
So I always, we get a lot of people that think, oh, $25,000, $50,000. Now, I don't know if they mean in sales, because that makes a big difference, because commissions, because 25,000 in commission would be about 250 in sales. Or if they just don't fully understand how quickly you can build a business in this industry, given the cost of travel and how many people are traveling right now. So that is what I would say. If you're under 250,000, your agent's probably going to ask questions as to why so low.
Okay. This is specifically speaking to retroactive. Does your E&O include full prior acts, or retro starts when the policy is in place?
So if that individual was on the call earlier, I touched on this in the very
Okay.
beginning.
Yeah.
So the only time that would ever make any sense is if you are coming from a claims made policy. If you're coming from a claims made policy, then you can get prior acts coverage. But just so everybody knows, including the individual that asked the question, prior acts coverage usually is 2 to 3 times the cost of your previous policy that you're paying one time in upfront for us to be able to pick up those claims. They call it prior acts, they call it tail coverage, they call it nose coverage, all essentially the same thing. You're coming from this insurance company, but it's a claims made format. You're going to us, which is an occurrence based format. We can pick up those claims, but it comes at a cost. And this is
Okay.
an industry standard. And so, you know, claims made and occurrence, if you have the choice, you never want a claims made policy if you have the choice of having an occurrence policy, which is what we have. Claims made, real quick, that means if I'm insured with Miguel for 2023 and I've been insured with him for 35 years, and then in 2024 I drop coverage on December 25th, and on January 1st I have $1 million claim, but I drop my policy December 25th, we don't owe you anything, even though we were friends for 35 years. It only covers you while you're insured with me.
Okay.
An occurrence-based format, which is what I sell, if you're insured for 2023 and then we part ways and then you have a claim in 2033 and we haven't talked in 10 years, we still will cover that claim 10 years later because it insures you indefinitely for that period of time you were with us. That's a huge difference. Most people have no clue that that's even a thing.
Okay.
if you're out
Somebody was
there-
like, are you occurrence based?
Yep. We occurrence based. And most of the stuff you'll find online, if you're buying those they're buying coverage online in 30 seconds or less, they're all going to be claims made policies.
Okay.
Good
All
for the
right.
insurance company, but not necessarily great for the consumer.
Okay. Lots of people or a few people asking about your info if they would like to get in touch with you about E&O insurance coverage, and I'll make sure that that is in your portal below. But if you wanted to share any email addresses or websites.
Yeah, my email, the best way to get a hold of me is going to be email, so it goes directly to me, and it'll be miguel.campos@bhspecialty.com. Miguel is M-I-G, you see it, M-I-G-U-E-L .campos, which is like camp, and then O-S, at B as in boy, H as in Henry, or Berkshire Hathaway, specialty.com.
Awesome.
If you go to our website, so our website is more heavily focused on the travel insurance side of our business. And no, I do not do travel insurance, and we sell directly through the website.
Totally separate.
Just so everybody knows. Yeah, don't email me about that.
Yeah.
I don't want to flood because everybody's always interested in that. But it's mainly travel insurance on there, and then there's an E&O button on the top where you can get information. But realistically, it's just like 10 questions, and you're going to end up with me anyways. So emailing is probably the better way.
Yeah, before we wrap up, I did want to go over kind of like other things that people can do, because yes, it's nice having insurance, but even when you have insurance, you still have to do other things. Like we always get asked if people are signing a decline insurance type waiver. So what are those other things operationally within your business that people should be doing to also kind of help mitigate and lessen that risk?
Yeah, risk mitigation strategies. Definitely. So terms and conditions, this is important. I know I talk with a lot of people and they kind of usually tell me that, yes, I use the vendor's terms and conditions. Well, that's great, but guess whose those are? Those are the vendors. So if the vendor gets sued, they have their terms and conditions, but you can't really, those aren't going to be very useful to you if you're sued. So if Rita and Miguel need to have their own terms and conditions specifically for my company or for my person. And my advice, there are a lot of places to get them online. I do not advise that. I mean, if it's the only thing you can do and afford, it's better than nothing. However, it is a lot of times you're talking 50 different jurisdictions. There's not a good enough site out there that's going to be able to give you great terms and conditions that isn't just an attorney, in fact. So if you can afford to do so, I would go to an attorney to seek out their expertise. And there are some good travel attorneys out there.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'll just plug Jeff Ment simply because we use him for a lot of to assist us with a lot of different things. And he's extremely good at what he does.
Yeah.
And very reasonable. So I would definitely consider that. And then another one that I have worked with is Chuny Wright, and she's done a lot of things in the travel industry as far as education. So Google either one of those individuals if you're looking to go that route.
Yeah.
Obviously, credit card fraud awareness. You need to be aware. Credit card fraud, it runs rampant, especially in this industry. Googling, searching, just understanding what that even means. What are the signs to look for credit card fraud? Because credit card fraud is one of those things that is not insurable by any insurance company ever at all. So if you use somebody's credit card fraudulently for $100,000 trip to Belize and it turns out to be fraudulent, your business is on the hook for it.
Oh, wow. Whew. That's a big one.
Yeah. So that's, And obviously that's, a lot of the credit card fraud we see is big, it's big fraud. So it's damaging to small businesses, damaging to any business, but it's definitely more damaging to smaller businesses.
Right.
So real quick takeaway on that is if you're questioning something, somebody's really, really pushy for this last minute flight one way for 8 people to a weird country you've never heard of, maybe have them fax the front and back of their identification and credit card and call the credit card company. There's a number on the back. Call that credit card company and have them verify with their customer that they are indeed making that purchase. It's going to take you a little extra time, but better than that than being, bankrupt.
Hundreds of thousands, exactly.
So just being aware of that. Use payment authorization forms when you can. If you get credit card chargebacks, the one way to defeat a credit card's chargeback from this unruly customer that didn't like the free coffee in their hotel and now wants $100,000 back, is having a payment authorization form signed by them or digitally signed by them. That's important. Keep really good records of everything. There shouldn't be a case where you can't have some sort of email digital timeline of all the stuff you did with this customer. That you have to do that nowadays. There's just no exception. You've got to have a digital timeline. Keep all that stuff. If you're, you hate junk in your email and all that, and you want it Zen inbox, that's fine. Archive it, put it in a folder, make sure you don't lose that information, because if you have a credit card chargeback or you have a lawsuit related to something disputing this, that, or the other thing, you're going to need records. We're going to need records in order to defend you. So keep really good records. And if it doesn't make any difference to you, keep them as long as you can. I would say minimum 5 years on anything if you can.
Oh yeah. And especially I'm thinking we're coming up to tax time too. You're going to need some of those for tax time anyways.
Yep.
The last thing that I remember that I was like, I wish more people realize this, because we talked slightly about, and we don't have to go too much into it, where sometimes you can get E&O with a host. I will personally say that's probably not the best thing that you should be doing. You should be getting your own policy. But kind of connecting that is that you have to also remember, if you're a hosted travel advisor, they're also one of your vendors like any other supplier is.
Yep.
And so I remember you had brought that up.
Yeah. So this is the one of the more complex, confusing things we discuss, and that I've literally discussed since day one of employment here at Berkshire Hathaway Travel Protection. And that is, a host is essentially a vendor, no different than any of the other vendors. They vend different things. So a host had better have its own E&O policy. If they don't, and I'll be so bold as to say, then you definitely should not be working with a host that does not have E&O insurance. Just that's it. But their E&O insurance, and I insure most of them personally in the United States, their E&O only has their name on it. Rita cannot add her name to the policy, nor her business. So only a vendor that the host is doing business with, that's not financially making money for it directly as an IC, can be added to a policy, like a college or something like that, or university or school. So nowhere on the policy does it say Rita or Rita's business. So if Rita or her business are ever sued for some reason, or she books under her business name and there's a loss, the host policy is not going to respond to the loss. The host is going to insure the host. That's what's named on the policy. Now, is there some level of coverage? There is some level of coverage, okay? And that's what hosts typically focus on. And I'm not saying or implying in this conversation that they're doing it for some nefarious reason or anything like that. That's not at all. They are travel experts. They're not insurance experts. So when I have a conversation and we're talking about, is there some coverage under here? And I go into the detail about, yes, there is some coverage. When you, as a potential IC, ask them if there's some coverage or if they have coverage, the answer is yes. They're not going to spend 3 hours going over insurance with you. That's not why you chose them. Let's be honest. You chose them for their economy of scale, their platform, etc. But you ask a simple question. Do you have E&O insurance? They give you a simple answer. Yes. It's your job to determine what that means, on what level. And I can tell you that there isn't a host policy out there that has your name on it. And if you're sued and your name is on the summons, you have no coverage. So that's extremely important to understand. It doesn't matter. I've worked with or dealt with pretty much every host in the United States. There isn't a single one that is going to have your name on it or can add your name on it. So just be aware of that. And if you don't have insurance right now and you have no idea what the cost is, take the time and go find out, because to just chance it because you think it's unaffordable, that's probably not a good business practice.
100.
So take the time, work with your insurance companies, work with your agents, your insurance agents, to really understand what it is you need, what it is you don't have, your liabilities, your risks, and find out, where you fit in or where insurance will fit into your business plan, because there should be room for it. There needs to be room for it.
Right. First off, thank you so much for taking the time. I know we are cutting it close and I have to join study hall in just a few minutes.
No problem.
Natasha just wrote in with a couple questions and I think they're fairly simple. So we'll answer these out and then wrap up. Do you and your agents do training throughout the year with your travel agents in Berkshire Hathaway?
So we don't do trainings per se, if I'm understanding what I think you mean by trainings. We don't have set dates where we just invite people to do trainings or anything like that. I don't really think anybody in this industry really does that, to be honest. However, what we do is things like this. This is, I probably do 20, 30 webinars a year with people like Rita, that I'll do. I've done podcasts. We'll do things like that. We also have had videos. You'll see them in my email signature and stuff like that. You can see they just kind of animate, an insurance claim or insurance issue as well, or things to contemplate as far as risk is concerned. That's typically what we do. Back in the day, we used to do seminars and stuff in person at trade shows. That's not really a thing anymore since COVID. We do everything online. I am open to it. We do have to mind the fact that we have to be here for our customers as well. And if I'm just spending all my time educating, that's not going to work. The logistics just don't work. So we tend to keep it to larger platforms or something smaller that can be larger if it's being posted somewhere.
Right. I'm maybe possible podcast episode in the future. The second question was, do you offer any resources like recommended forms besides the credit card authorization forms and travel insurance waivers that we should be using for our agency that may come up in different cases or claims?
No, we don't. And there's a good reason. We don't want to be held liable for something not working if it doesn't work, because then you could hold us liable saying it didn't work. So, and there's 50 different jurisdictions. So we wouldn't possibly have that amount of collateral material, because that's 50 different attorneys we'd have to be dealing with to get 50 different forms. So it's not a feasible thing for us to do. For travel insurance waivers, if you're selling travel insurance, your travel insurer should be able to give you those. I don't know of any that don't have some sort of travel insurance waiver. And then resources like ASTA, CLIA, Nest, etc. A lot of those will have sort of sample terms and conditions. But as I said earlier, be aware, a lot of these are just generic. So generic stuff a lot of times won't hold up in court really on any level. Only one devised by an attorney for your specific company, for your specific jurisdiction, is really going to be the best solution. The other is better than nothing, I guess, but more or less as a scare tactic to a consumer. Like, hey, you signed this, Miguel, okay, and they go away. But if they're not scared off by that, it's probably not going to hold a lot of weight in court if it wasn't actually drafted by an attorney using all the legal jargon for that particular jurisdiction in that particular year.
Yeah, yeah. And that's, I feel like really good resources are probably some of the attorneys that you mentioned. And I know I've utilized Tom Carpenter, who I think does a lot of collaborative work with Jeff also. So there's a lot of really great attorneys within the industry that you can get some resources from as well. So I'm going to wrap this up. This was like a chock full, amazing session, like so much good feedback coming in the chat. So
Awesome.
again, thank you, Miguel, for being here and for
Hey.
sharing all the ins and outs that come with E&O insurance.
Yeah, my pleasure. Happy to do it again. I love educating people on this stuff because, if I was in your shoes, this is not common information realistically. I mean,
Right.
if we're being real here. So it's nice to be able to have something like this put on so that people can find out what they don't know. So thank you, Rita, for the invite and for doing this for the travel agent community, because I'm sure they appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I love like putting these events on together so that we can have these types of conversations. And thank you, travel advisors. Oh, you've already got an email. Somebody sent you an email.
Perfect.
Thank you, travel advisors, for tuning in. If you have upgraded to Study Hall Pass, I'll see you in a couple minutes. But other than that, it is Foundations Day. We will see you tomorrow on Operations Day. All right. Bye, everyone.
See you later. Thanks, Rita. See you, everybody.